The Congressional Human Rights Caucus is very pleased to open this hearing on human rights issues in Yugoslavia. I think it's important for all of us to begin by underscoring the purpose of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, which is a bipartisan activity of the Congress, and which has one single objective, and that is to diminish and hopefully eventually to eliminate human rights abuses wherever they occur.
The Serbian government, acting with substantial support from the national government, is brutally repressing human and political rights in the autonomous province of Kosovo, which is 90% of the population of which is Albanian.
It's time for the United States to demand justice in Yugoslavia. No more business as usual in Belgrade. No more business. We want Yugoslavia officials to know that as long as they abuse their own people, they shouldn't expect any support from America. America has the leverage, and we should use it. Yugoslavia should know that it can never achieve economic growth without a growth in their respect for freedom and justice.
A most distinguished member of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, a member of its executive committee, and an indefatigable fighter for human rights for many years, Congressman Ben Gilman of New York.
The raging tide of democratization in Eastern Europe makes more salient the issue of human rights and political autonomy for ethnic Albanians in the Kosovo province of Yugoslavia. In the recent past, military presence and violence and harassment in the province of Kosovo has provided an ominous reminder of the repression that comes from ethnocentric attitudes that have no place today in modern society.
A distinguished former colleague, most effective former member of the Executive Committee of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus, who has fought for human rights on many continents and in many different situations, and who has taken such a prominent leadership role on this issue, the Honorable Joe DioGuardi.
In Geneva, I went there because Mr. Hadri was shot down because he was ready to deliver to the special rapporteur the 34 names documented. I took those names literally off his body. His wife gave them to me, and I continued that journey under threats, and I had to wear a bulletproof vest. Apartheid is alive and well. It now exists in Yugoslavia in the Kosovo province. It is now gone from South Africa, or at least it's going. And Yugoslavia has a Nelson Mandela, at least the Albanians have, Adam Damace, who was in jail for over 27 years. And Nelson Mandela was released before even any talk of releasing Adam Damace occurred. If this is America, and if we're going to stand up for a system that is supposed to be equal and fair, certainly our government has to take a strong position. And I hope we're not going to be swayed by all of a sudden this generosity that comes on the day of our hearing when you know they tried to cancel this hearing, postpone it, and do so many other things. The term crime of apartheid is defined, and it shall apply to inhuman acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination of one racial group of persons over any other group of persons, or systematically oppressing them. That is what has gone on in South Africa. That is what's going on right now in Kosovo, even as we speak, because the state of emergency has not been lifted. That's what they said. Let's see what they're really doing. And they don't let too many people in to see what they're doing. I went there twice. I could not meet with the press. I was forced out of the hotel in Pristina, forced to do a press conference on the street, and they threatened to arrest me for a public display because that was against their law. You cannot talk on their streets. It's incredible that a system like this exists in the world today when there are 2 million, by their count, Albanians in that province, over 90%, and they want to emasculate them in every way. The continuation of apartheid and the denial of democracy cannot restore political stability either in Yugoslavia or in Kosovo. The United States Congress, Mr. Chairman, has contributed to the liberalization of other countries in Eastern Europe, and I urge that it contribute likewise to the improvement of human rights conditions in Kosovo and Yugoslavia.
I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DioGuardi made some very strong statements, and I must say that I do not believe that there have been any threats against any of the lives of those who have come here from Kosovo. That I do not believe, Mr. Chairman, and I know that some of the FBI and others are here because I happened to call them. Me. Now, you also said that the fight is between communism versus democracy. How come, since communism is decreasing in Yugoslavia, this problem seems to be rising up to the top? Were conditions under Tito better at that time?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you.
Well,
you
let me
made a
say this.
statement.
I made a statement because I obviously am talking about Serbia, not Slovenia, not Croatia, not Bosnia.
I'm talking.
Because those republics are doing
Mr.
a good job.
DioGuardi, I ask you a specific question, and that question concerned the rise of the decrease of communism all over Yugoslavia.
Which I applaud,
Yeah,
except in Serbia.
Right, very good. And this problem is now rising. I'm asking you, were the conditions under Tito better? Since that is when communists really reigned.
Let me say this. I didn't spend much time studying Tito in my history books. I was studying
Too
Patrick
bad.
Henry, Thomas Paine, and I could say this, that...
Mr.
But I've had-
Chairman,
no,
will you
excuse
ask
me.
both sides to
But-
refrain from applauding
Yes.
so we can get on with this?
But I can say that recently I've spent a lot of time studying Mr. Milosevic. And let me tell you, he doesn't do himself or his people justice. I met with many prominent Serbs and had many good conversations with them in Belgrade. But the kind of political rancor he is creating for his own personal ambitions will be the undoing of his great republic and the undoing of Yugoslavia if he persists.
No. That, I'm sorry, communism none of us support. But you made a statement about communism, that this was communism versus democracy. And we do know that communism is decreasing all over. And we're all supporting it, and we're all pushing for it. But this problem seems to be on the rise, and I'm just saying, I'm asking about the comparison.
We have to
Mr.
go with
DioGuardi, you
what
made
is-
some very
Yeah.
inflammatory
I
statements
did,
here.
because Mr.
And I am
Milosevic
now
has been very
asking for
inflammatory
some-
against the Albanians, and someone has to speak up against them. And thank God we have the Congress of the United States to stand up for oppressed people,
Well,
including the Kosovars.
Yes, but Mr. DioGuardi, you need to be accurate when you're a witness, especially when you're a lobbyist for a group.
I'm an
Now,
ethnic
you have
Albanian.
to be
I'm an ethnic
accurate.
Albanian. I'm an ethnic Albanian. I'm the president of the Albanian American Civic League and the Albanian American Foundation, and I resent those intonations.
All right. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Chair would like to thank Congressman DioGuardi.
May I
for-
respond, please, to...
Of course.
Okay. I would like to say this. I don't indict the Serbian people. I don't question Congresswoman Bentley's motives. She's proud of her ethnic background the way I'm proud of mine. And I applaud her that she could stand up for them the way I stand up for Albanians. And I want to see freedom-loving people everywhere treated the way they're supposed to be treated. But Congresswoman Bentley, the Yugoslav Constitution says that all ethnic groups in Yugoslavia should be treated equally. I think the issue here today is that the Albanians are not getting the same treatment as the other groups, and really that's what this is all about, plus the fact that while communism is on the decrease in Yugoslavia in general, as we've seen with the Slovenian and the Croatian elections, it doesn't seem to be diminishing in Serbia, and that's the problem, because that's where Kosovo is. So let's hope we can all work together. The issue here is to get dialogue. You and I spoke over the weekend, and you said that perhaps we should sit down with Congressman Lantos, and I applaud you for that. I think that we should sit down. I went to speak to Milosevic. He wouldn't speak to me. Now, maybe I'm not the one he wants to speak to, but maybe there are others he should speak to. But how about you and me deciding to meet to see if we can find reasonable voices on both sides, to put them across the table, to finally get equality for everybody in Yugoslavia, because that's the way it is here in America, and that's God's way.
Chairman will now call on his good friend and distinguished colleague from the state of Colorado, Congressman Hank Brown.
As the governments of Eastern Europe embrace the idea of freedom, Yugoslavia, who once led the way in Eastern Europe, has not made the progress others have. The democratic forces emerging in Yugoslavia have been met with crackdowns, incarceration of political prisoners, and imposition of martial law. For over a year, Serbian authorities imposed a state of emergency in the province of Kosovo. However, despite oppressive actions taken by the Yugoslav government, democratic political groups have blossomed and are now calling for autonomy and democracy.
Congresswoman Bentley will introduce an author, human rights activist, Dobrika Ćosić. Congresswoman Bentley.
I'm very pleased, Mr. Chairman, to introduce Mr. Dobrika Ćosić, who is regarded today as the greatest living Serbian writer.
The Serbs are the most numerous among Yugoslav nations, and they are the most degraded and the most subjugated in the Yugoslav multinational state. This degradation and subjugation caused by the ideology of an erroneous national policy instituted by Tito and the Comintern Party.
And I want to introduce the first panel, Dr. Ibrahim Rogova. Would you step to the table, please? And Professor Gazman Pula.
The official policy, and even more so the actual governmental practice, carried on with a repressive approach toward the Albanians in Yugoslavia. Such an approach produced vast and most drastic violation of individual human rights. Albanians, not only in Kosovo, but in Yugoslavia in general, were subjected to countless violations of their individual human rights, which were meant and amounted to vast violation of their national rights as well.
Mund të them se gati nuk ka mbetur shqiptar që nuk është prekur dhe nuk ka kaluar nëpër durët e policisë, duke përfshirë edhe veten.
I would add to this statement that there are almost no Albanians in Yugoslavia left who have not been or have not received some kind of police treatment. One of such being Mr. Rugova himself.
Kjo nuk do në koment dhe po e përfundoj me një proverb shqiptar.
This requires no comment, and I will end with a proverb with an Albanian proverb.
Miku I mirë njihet në ditë të vështira.
Saying the good friend is to be proven in hard times.
In the final panel, we're going to add two gentlemen that will make very short statements, but the gist of the panel will be Dr. Recep Ćosić. I'd like Dr. Ćosić to come to the table. He's a professor from the University of Pristina, professor of literature, and also Professor Luljeta Pula-Bećiri. She's the sister of Professor Gazman Pula. She is also a professor at the University of Pristina, and she's president of the Women's Association of the Democratic Alliance of Kosovo. And by the way, I know that Professor Dr. Ćosić has a written statement in English, so if he could start off with some Albanian, then you can take over and read the entire statement as opposed to going back and forth. Okay?
Nuk jam antar asnjë partie, do të thotë jam intelektual I pavarur.
I'm not a member of any party. I'm an independent intellectual.
Kam kënaqësinë që në këtë institucion të lartë
I have the pleasure that in this highly esteemed institution
që simbolizon shembullin e demokracisë parlamentare
that symbolizes the best of parliamentary democracy
dhe të drejtësisë planetare
and of planetary justice,
të paraqes disa të dhëna
to present some facts and data
mbi terrorin 10-vjeçar të Serbisë mbi popullin shqiptar.
About the 10-year-old terror of the Serbian authorities over the Albanians in Kosovo.
Tekstin tim do ta lexoj bashkëpunëtori im.
My text will be presented by interpreter in this, our colleague interpreter in this case. Years of state violence. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, the historical memory of the Albanian people is full of old wounds as well as new ones. In our history, there are periods which we call tragical, and among them, as especially tragic one, the last decade will be remembered. Even before this time, We have tasted all the forms of violence brought up by the totalitarian communist regime. But the forms of violence which we have suffered during the last decade in Kosovo are very diverse and very brutal. For 10 years now, we have been living under the state of emergency, which has been repeated 3 times, and which was held by continuously more sophisticated means, methods, and instruments. These were years of the most cruel aggression against the elementary rights of the individual, the family, and the Albanian people in general in Yugoslavia. During the 10 last years, the regime has deprived the right of living to more than 100 Albanians, including young and old, which could not even be buried freely, nor could flowers be laid over their graves, nor their graves be marked down. Several hundred persons were wounded by firearms, while only in January and February of this year, 204 youngsters and children were wounded. Several Albanians were found shot dead on the roadside, some drowned in the rivers. Some were sent to their families in wooden boxes with explanations that they had committed suicide by hanging themselves or by jumping from the prison windows. Some were never found.
Ajo është se forcat unitariste të autoriteteve serbe ushtrojnë terror të pakuptueshëm mbi popullatën e pafajshme shqiptare me qëllim të paramenduar mirë të nxitjes së shpërthimit masiv të revoltës, që më pastaj do të shfrytëzohej si casus belli për represalje shtetërore dhe qërim brutal hesapesh me popullatën shqiptare.
This widespread opinion among the Albanians is that the authorities, the Serbian authorities, the dark forces within the Serbian authorities do apply this incomprehensible police violence and state terror over the Albanians in order to incite a popular revolt on behalf of the Albanians, which would in turn then be used as a casus belli or as a pretext for a much larger scale or a massive scale massacres and reprisal of Albanian population in Yugoslavia, and push away once more and hopefully for longer the democratization of the democracy that is sweeping Europe and is reaching Kosovo as well. A number of photographs of the people being affected by the police violence in Kosovo.
Një incizim në videokasetë të një vajze të helmuar 18 vjeçare dhe pasojat e helmimit të saj, të cilën e solli nëna e saj, antare e shoqatës sonë.
A video cassette recording of the poisoning attacks that an 18-year-old girl has suffered in her home and has been recorded by the members of her family and was brought to me by the lady which is a member of our Women's Association.
I'd like to call on Congressman DioGuardi.
Well, I would like to conclude before I just introduce some people who came a long way, and I've gotten notes from other people who we could not hear as much as we would like. As you can see, the patience of the chair. I should end with a reference, Congressman Lantos, to an article that I just quickly alluded to in my testimony, and this article is dated Wednesday, April 18th, 1990. It's entitled Perspectives on Eastern Europe, Ethnic Troubles, Top Agenda for New Eastern European Regimes. It's not by a Serb and it's not by an Albanian. It's by a respected columnist from Vienna, Eric Born. And just let me read just the last part of it, and I'd like to submit the whole thing for the record, Mr. Chairman. It says, the Yugoslav Party was not directly involved in the general communist collapse, but it has felt a strong backlash from the return to democracy, above all over Kosovo. The province has as many Albanians as Transylvania has Hungarians. Since the Tito era closed in 1981, it has constantly hovered on the brink of and often slipped over into civil war. Parallels go beyond numbers. Transylvania's Hungarians look for their lost rights, not reunion with Hungary. Similarly, and this is not DioGuardi speaking, similarly, few Kosovars look toward Albania. However much a greater Serbia-minded Serbian leadership in Belgrade argues to the contrary. What Albanians riot for is the return of the autonomy of the 1970s and their future status of a republic within the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Czechs, Poles, Slovaks, and Hungarians all seem concerned to resolve their problems. But with Kosovo, Yugoslavia is the odd man out. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev has a bigger problem in Lithuania, but he has at least hints at possible compromise in a looser Confederate Union. In Kosovo, there has been no talk even of dialogue. Helsinki Watch called Serbian and Yugoslav federal policy there, quote, a frightening example of one-party dictatorship, close quote. It is ironic that the country that broke first with the Soviet system and established equality among its nationalities for 40 years should now have Eastern Europe's gravest ethnic problem. This just appeared last week, and I want to submit the entire article for the record, Mr. Chairman. I believe these people are here today because they want this room and this hearing to be a model for the whole world, especially in Kosovo.
The memory of this 5-hour hearing, with all its pain and all its anguish, will go down as a historic episode as the people of the great country of Yugoslavia learn to live together in peace and harmony. This hearing is adjourned.